it's essentially a game of guess the Starchitect quote, but with a twist.
Okay.
And the twist is, these are all from your interviews.
Oh.
So the quotes are all quotes that have been said to you.
Okay.
So you should know them, but
not necessarily.
No, you shouldn't.
I've done 20.
Yeah, but what the thing is, the quotes have been picked kind of based on, these would be quintessential things the architect would say. So that's why it would be good for the viewers as well. They can play the game because these are typical things for these architects to say.
Okay.
But just to remind you, you've got Rem Koolhaas, who you interviewed.
Yep.
You got Peter Zumthor,
Yep.
who you interviewed. You got Richard Rogers, Charles Correa, and Santiago Calatrava.
Yeah.
So these are just for your reference.
Yeah.
I'm gonna say the quotes, and you're gonna.
Oh, you've only got some of my people.
Yeah,
I did a lot more than this.
Yeah. Honestly, those interviews were incredible because these are the guys my generation was raised kind of learning about as core reading. You got to go read about these people when we were in uni. So, but you got to sit down and speak to them for ages. So that is that's pretty cool. So what we'll do first is I'll read out this quote.
Okay.
And you have to tell me who you think it is. For the people watching on YouTube, you will get the names on the screen, so you know who Angela has got as well. So yeah, first quote. I wouldn't say I've ever designed a glass tower. I've never been so stupid as to do that.
Ooh, that's a tricky one. Well, who hasn't done one? Well, I'd say probably Peter Zumthor wouldn't have actually done one. It's kind of the wit of Charles Correa as well, because he would be absolutely adverse to doing one, so I'd put it on Charles.
Okay, we'll lock in your first answer.
Hey!
As Charles Correa. Cool. The next quote is, by the way, you can change them if you want.
Okay.
This is a long one, but it's worth it. So it's really weird that 98% of the world is countryside, or at least non-city, and we've been totally obsessed with the city and neglecting everything else. I'm sure sooner or later we'll discover that there is some relationship between the two.
I'd imagine that's a Charles Jenkins quote. Yeah. Richard Rogers would also say that, actually. That's more of a Richard Rogers. Because I don't have Charles Jenks in front of me of my short list. Richard Rogers would say that, because that's a very people person.
Is that locking in?
I don't know. How am I doing?
I can't say yet.
Oh, right. I don't know yet.
I'll take
Okay.
the end.
Well, yeah. He would say something like that, because, you know, when he wrote the advice on the London plan and everything like that, it was very much about cities, and it's quite a thoughtful thing to say.
Cool. So we got Richard Rogers for that one. Here's your third quote. I could see that my first couple of buildings were full of forms that came from role models. I feel very embarrassed with myself to see this in my own buildings.
Probably a Calatrava kind of thing to say.
Right. Why?
Because he would be what many people regard as a Starchitect, and he's also very controversial. So you either love him or hate him. Now, I interviewed anybody that came across my threshold when I was RIBA president, and it was great. It was a great honour to be able to ask somebody on the spot, would they come upstairs for a 20-minute discussion on film, and the RIBA videographer was on hand, and they all said yes. So, yeah.
Oh, wow, so you did those interviews quite impromptu?
Very impromptu. Wow. No warning.
Good thinking.
Yeah, no warning. And that was quite good, because they were in my bright pink-walled office there, as you can see from one of my photographs, and it was at a round table, so it was in the round. Another very important thing, not to have a table with one person on one side and one at the other. This was a much more friendly format, and I think that just read me that quote again.
I could see that my first couple of buildings were full of forms that came from role models. I felt very embarrassed with myself to see this in my own buildings.
That almost sounds quite humble thing to say.
It does.
So therefore it wouldn't necessarily be Calatrava. Yeah, looking at my names in front of me, who's most likely to say that?
The other thing is, I think when we're done with these, you might need to reshuffle or think about reshuffling answers, or because I think
Charles Correa might say something like that.
By the way, each quote is linked to one, so it is an equal amount of answers to.
Okay, so I've got 5 questions and 5 of them. Okay. See, that's quite a humble thing. Charles Correa would say something like that because, you know, he's the kind of person that...
You've locked Charles for the first one, though.
You see, I have, but that's not necessarily right.
Right.
I'd say he would be... Peter Zumthor would be the kind of person that would admit to being embarrassed. I can't see the other 3 being embarrassed. Unless
Very thoughtful.
Unless they were trying to... No. Okay, it's either Peter or Charles. I'll go for Peter.
You can stay halfway on it. We can move to the next.
Okay, move to the next one.
Okay, but I'll do a Peter Zumthor and Charles Correa, so don't forget. So the 4th one, which is the second last one. London now competes with New York. There's no other city that's in a position to compete with it, and that's vitality. That's culture, creativity. We're learning more and more that culture only comes from cities, its densities, compact cities, and intensification is critical.
Well, Richard Rogers would definitely say that, and that's a London-centric one.
Right.
So I'm going to stick with Richard for that one.
Okay.
These were all
very confident.
These were all 7 years ago.
No, you're doing well, and this is what I wanted. You're going through the kind of thinking behind it as well, which is, I hope people are doing that as well at home. So, just to let you know, Richard Rogers is also for your second answer. So you might want to change that. Yeah. So, which is the countryside one.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, actually, countryside. He's not here. Okay. I did 20 interviews, remember?
Couldn't get them all on.
Okay.
Final quote is, architecture is very abstract. You could almost consider that sculpture is a particular case of architecture. Painting is also a particular case of architecture, and engineering and architecture are so closely married together that it's almost the same thing.
That's Calatrava.
Final answer.
Final answer.
Okay, so that's it. I'll say your 5th and 4th answers are very confident. So what do you want to do with?
So which 2? Let me knock them out then. Which 2? I don't remember which 5th.
So Richard Rogers and Calatrava you've done for the last 2, which were very confident. So maybe you don't want to change them.
You're not going to tell me if they're right or wrong yet?
No.
Okay, no hints, okay.
And your 3rd one, you were torn between Peter Zumthor and Correa, which was about London. Sorry. Peter Zumthor and Charles Correa for the humble one. So the one who said, I'm embarrassed to see that in my buildings. So who do you want to lock that in with now?
Okay, read the full quote again.
I could see that my first couple of buildings were full of forms that came from role models. I felt very embarrassed with myself to see this in my own buildings.
I'd say Charles Correa.
Okay, so
might not be right, but
so does that mean I wouldn't say I've ever designed a glass tower? I've never been so stupid to do that. Is going to be Zumthor?
Oh no, sorry. You're quite right. It reminded me of that one. Charles Correa would say I'd never done a glass building.
Okay, and you're going for Zumthor for the 3rd one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that just leaves you didn't put Rem Koolhaas with anyone. So does that mean
I know him the least. And that was a joint interview with Charles Jenks.
Right.
And they were talking to each other quite a lot.
Yes. They were.
So
yes.
I hardly got a look in.
Yeah, he didn't. He wasn't facing you all the time.
I found that my most difficult interview.
We're going to get into that because I'd love to understand the dynamics of you being an interviewer as well. Cause especially sitting across the room with someone like that. So does that mean for the second one, which was about the countryside and seeing a relationship between the 2?
Yeah, that would be in a conversation with Charles Jenks, so I would imagine. So I'd put Rem in there.
Okay. Well, that's it. We're locked in.
Okay.
And we're going to go through your answers now.
Okay.
So for question 1, which was about never building a glass tower, and I've never been so stupid as to do that, you said Charles Correa.
Yeah.
You were right.
Oh, phew!
So
one right so far.
For number 2, which was what we just talked about, which was it's really weird that 98% of the world is countryside, and you're trying to find a link between them. You said Rem Koolhaas. You were right as well.
Oh,
so that's good.
Good.
The more you're right, the less chance you have of being wrong.
That's right.
For the third one, which you struggled with, which was I could see that my first couple of buildings were full of forms that came from role models, and he felt embarrassed, which is a very humble thing to say, quite rightly. It was from humble Zumthor, so you got that right too. Very impressive.
I mean, I did interview them, remember? I know it was 7 years ago, but...
You know what? When I finish interviews, like for this podcast, I usually do remember, because you have to really do your research to be able to sit down with these people anyway. So, now the last two, you could either get them both wrong or both right. So if you get one of them right, you know you got the other one right too. So you said Richard Rogers for the London and New York competition, and you said Calatrava for architecture being painting and etc. and engineering. And you were both right again.
Thank goodness for that.
Very impressive. Well done.
Well, that was just pure chance.
100%. And a good note to kick off the more serious discussions, perhaps.
Okay.